Welcome to the Emotional Endurance Movement, where we chit chat about how we're staying regulated in a very dysregulating world.
Come along with us as we deal with life's messiness.
I'm Laurie Page.
And I'm Crimson MacDonald. And this week we're talking about coping with burnout.
We were all traumatized together, and we all probably need to get together and talk about that. So if you want to figure out when I could bring some brownies, I don't know, maybe.
I don't think it's something we'll ever talk about. Coping with burnout.
I almost hate to even talk about burnout anymore because I feel like people are burnt out from burnout.
I agree 100% that this conversation is so
It's
exhausting.
cringe.
It is kind of cringe because there's two schools of thought, in my opinion, on this one. There's people that glorify it.
Yeah.
There's like a glorification of like, oh, almost like I'm so busy, the glorification of busy. But I feel like after the pandemic, and maybe because we were all locked up for so long and we were like really glorifying busy, and that was like your metric of success. And then after the pandemic, there's a new movement of like not being busy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like people don't want to be overscheduled because they got a preview of what it was like.
Yeah.
And that's my theory of why burnout is more pervasive now, because we spent so many years talking about like the importance of being busy. And then the pandemic hit and we really emphasized that, right? Like, oh my God, I want to go out. I want to go to amusement parks. I want to go to museums. I want to go see my friends. I want to have dinner parties. I want to have a cocktail party. I want to go to happy hour. Name all the things we all wanted to do. Let's be honest. And now I think when the world got back and going, I think everyone was like, one, we've been through a traumatic event. And two, like, it was kind of nice being at home. It was kind of nice not being overscheduled. So I think our resilience was depleted, like our endurance for day-to-day busy glorification culture got depleted.
I agree and I disagree, because the first thing I want to say is that I am very much aligned with what you're saying as far as this pattern of busyness that we all had prior to the pandemic. It felt to me at the time unsustainable.
Right.
And what was interesting is that I've now come to see I have two beliefs about the pandemic. First of all, I think that we were all traumatized together. We were all traumatized together, and we all probably need to get together and talk about that. So if you want to figure out when I could bring some brownies, I don't know, maybe.
I don't think it's something we'll ever talk about.
Okay.
We're all too traumatized.
I got hurt and I will bring brownies. But the look of us all getting together and processing through that
Yeah.
together, I think that many of us are realizing that we came out of that experience ultimately transformed.
Yeah.
And I want to say transform more than traumatized, because I believe that the trauma exists within us. And I do think that the end result, the alchemy of trauma, is often some level of transformation, whether
Right.
that's major or minor, on both the trauma and the transformation side. I think I've come to really accept professionally that trauma touches everybody's life in one shape or form. And so because of that, and because of my existential belief system, I've come to understand the meaning of that, at least in my view, is that it's a cause for development. Just a PSA. That doesn't mean that I want people to be traumatized. That doesn't mean that I like trauma. That doesn't mean that I accept trauma. In fact, I think part of the challenge right now is I think a lot of us are being traumatized by systems that we're paying for,
Yeah.
which is an interesting form of abuse to
Or we're stuck in.
And that leads me to my bigger point, which is that the trauma is ongoing. It is not yet resolved. We are still seeing the impact of these things, and I think that for the rest of our lives it will be that way. We went through an incredible experience. It's part of our story and it's still unfolding. And as somebody that has struggled with a very different but similar personal kind of arc with my trauma, I think part of it is recognizing that, like, it's here, it happened, and there are maybe if we can tolerate the fact that there can be benefits along with these great losses,
Mhm.
which I understand takes a lot of emotional endurance to do, but if we can tolerate that fact, then I think we can look for what's the opportunity for transformation. I think that we needed that great interruption. We all needed to pause. There were great lessons learned. And the other piece is some people really struggled in that space. You know, there were extroverts who were really, for the first time, you know, extroverts who really had the world built for them. And for the first time, that world was not available to them. And that was very challenging. We saw a lot of relationships end because people realized that they either weren't with the right person or that one person couldn't be their everything. And that was an existential crisis for like, then why are we doing this?
Right.
So, all this to say, I think that we are all burned out because we are in a period of great trauma and transformation.
I am exhausted. I can't shut my brain off. I don't feel equipped to deal with any of this. And the truth is, I don't know how much longer I can keep this up.
If thoughts like that sound familiar, you're not alone. Cope 365 is here to help you stop the spiral using a simple, gamified approach that shows you how to cope in ways that actually work. You can stop lashing out, shutting down, or just pretending you're fine while you suffer in silence and instead learn to regulate, recover, and keep going without burning out or losing your relationships or yourself. Cope 365 is here to help you fortify what matters most, your capacity to endure so that stress doesn't steal your joy, your health, or your future. Go to cope365.com and enter promo code EMM for 30% off of any of our packages.
I wouldn't that's the part the transformation is the part that I think is causing more burnout for us, and there's a soapbox here, and I won't get on it, but there are pre-pandemic systems that the reality is weren't serving us,
Yeah.
but it was able to be masked. The pandemic resurfaced these that they can't be masked anymore. And I think that, it's like the back to office, the back to, like trying to revert back to a
Yeah.
system. I think that's causing a lot of the burnout too,
Yeah.
right? Is because it's disingenuous, it's unauthentic to our being
Yeah.
of who we are today. And I feel really bad for children that are either coming of age now or will, in the near future. They don't know that pre-pandemic world
Yeah.
and they're being forced into the ideas of it. And it's almost like trying to explain beautiful cathedral in New York to someone in sub-Saharan Africa, tribal living. Like it just, and you cannot even comprehend the ideas that our systems are built to enable. And so I think the burnout that we're feeling as a society, and it's not necessarily anyone's fault, it's a lack of leadership that's dragging it on.
Well,
But
I think it's lack of leadership naming it. You
yeah,
know, things have changed, people have changed, realities have changed. A lot has changed. And I think by trying to force people back into old systems without naming it, there's a level of cruelty there. There's a level of gaslighting there. There's a level of inauthenticity there.
or let's just say this, it's a waste of time because we have to learn how to build systems for the world that is.
I
So if
mean, you're
we
not going to build resilient systems if you're not acknowledging what is. I mean,
right,
that is the first fundamental coping skill is acknowledging that this stuff like has an impact. People struggling to adapt and find balance in your organization costs your organization money.
absolutely.
It costs you talent, it costs you resources, it costs you innovation, it costs you so many different things.
Yeah.
And that is the true, like, business argument for what we're talking about. But I think it even goes a step further to say that people now recognize, a level of agency, I
Right.
think, within themselves, and they're more equipped to have these complex conversations with themselves about how they're dealing with any situation. And you bring up something else interesting, which is this idea of like, people don't have the resilience. I do think a lot of us are out of practice for that sort of thing. Could we
Mhm.
get back to that for sure? But I think that's another one of those naming things is like we got to say like our social my social battery is not what it once was. and going out and doing things like that just cost different. I'm also in a different developmental stage. I'm also doing different things. This was always going to happen. This was always going to be true, but the pandemic puts a unique wrinkle on it. But I do have, I believe that we are in the midst of great transformation, but there is great challenge in that transformation. And I do think from a human empowerment standpoint, one of the most radical and empowering things you can do is to stay regulated, because being baited into dysregulation
Mhm.
is something that we're seeing really being utilized across platforms to help predict human behaviors, the outcome. It's engineering our response. And so knowing how to stay regulated in a dysregulating world is a superpower. And I believe
Absolutely.
that it's a superpower many of us started developing when the pandemic happened. And we're just now getting the opportunity to really develop the language and to talk about it.
Well, and I think that's, the emotional endurance movement, our company spreading change, all of that, I think stems from if you talk to big successful CEOs or recruiters or people that know how to find talent, they always say there's a common variable, which is adversity. You're going to find your best talent is going to be among people that have had adverse situations that they have faced.
Yep.
And if you're making bets on people that have gone through the fire of things,
Yep.
gives them some level of gives you a level of confidence that they're going to get through your fires with you.
Yeah.
And so I think it's fascinating because the pandemic did set the ground where, many multiple generations went through the fire together. And in that moment, the people that have done a lot of work on themselves, their internal psychological capital, we would say hope, optimism, efficacy, resiliency, people that had those cups full when it hit, they did fare better.
Yeah.
And it did show the inequity that nobody had been talking about before, which is resources like money, affluence are never as strong as the resources of being raised or having experience with resilience and
Yeah.
endurance. That's the best thing you can give your kids, honestly. And it's the best lesson, but it's not integrated in our school system. They're doing
Yeah.
much better in today's world, I will say. We didn't even talk about psychology when we were in high
Yeah.
school. And now it is, but it is interesting because it made us all go through the fire. And now we have this inequity in society of people that were equipped, that weren't equipped, and the manifestation of the dysregulation if they weren't equipped, and the
Yeah.
manifestation of the resentment of the people that were equipped. And I think that's why we're
And
trying
how
to.
it plays out every single day. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a good one. We should unpack that one soon,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of people really feel that. No, I totally agree. I think that one of the strongest things we can do for our children, for those we love around us, is to model how we handle hard things. And sometimes that means I got dysregulated and I need to do the cleanup work and I need to show you how I do it. And sometimes that means being able to stay and shift in the space. So I appreciate you sharing. This was a great conversation. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of the Emotional Endurance Movement. Make sure to like and follow us for more great coping and emotional endurance content. And remember, you're not alone. We'd love to hear from you. Check out the show notes and let us know how you're coping, what you're coping with, and how we can support you.